Thank you very much. It's awesome to see this many people here, and I'm happy to be here myself. I will just introduce myself, and then we can go around and the panelists can introduce themselves, I thought. My name is Hamilton Nolan. I am a labor reporter, write about labor movement and unions and politics for In These Times magazine currently. And I am also a member of the Writers Guild of America East. I'm a council member there. And last year at the Writers Guild, we, myself and a group of other people on the Council of the Writers Guilds, got a resolution passed calling on the AFL-CIO to kick out IUPA, which is the police union member of the AFL-CIO. And I think we were the first, or we were the only AFL-CIO member union to formally ask them to do that. And I'm happy to talk about that later more if anybody is interested. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be the moderator. And if we can have the panelists just introduce themselves, say who you are, and also talk a little bit about why you got interested in this issue and why you got involved in Drop the Cops in the first place. So first, please, Julia Wallace.
Hey, can people hear me okay? Okay, cool. I have the fan on. Okay, fabulous. So my name is Julia Wallace, and I'm part of SEIU Drop the Cops. I'm also a rank and file member of SEIU Local 721. I work for the Department of Mental Health. I have been fighting against the police and police affiliation for some years. I was able to get resolutions passed unopposed in the African American caucus of SEIU Local 721. And it was also passed, but with some opposition, by the Latino caucus of SEIU Local 721. And you know, I think the police are not part of the working class, and we shouldn't be using our dues and our powers to be fighting for them when they are oppressive to us. They are oppressive to our community. And just researching, I found video footage of the 1990s Justice for Janitors strike that happened where the LAPD beat people up in Century City. Some of those people still workers in SEIU. And I think really the labor movement has to take a leadership role, and we as rank and file workers, activists, revolutionaries, we can take this role in as being workers to be fighting for police abolition and to be fighting for a world, frankly, run by the working class. So that's part of that. I'm so excited to be here. I'm also a writer for leftvoice.org, and we've written some articles on it. Love In These Times and the interview that was done with Mary Kay Henry, kind of calling her out on that. And I think that we really are the ones that have to take this fight, you know, to our workplaces, and that's where we will really be able to have more successes in fighting the police and in fighting the bosses that attack us and the landlords that evict us and oppress us. So really looking forward to talking with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Shout out to Left Voice also. Everybody should read Left Voice if you don't already. Next, Asta, can you introduce yourself and talk about why you got involved in this issue?
Awesome, thank you. So my full name is Mark Ostapiak, but I've been going by Asta for, I guess, over 30 years now. So you can call me Asta. Really excited to be here. I'm a member of SEIU 1021, a 60,000 member local in Northern California. I'm a rank and file member who works for the Human Services Agency in San Francisco. So I'm a frontline worker that has been working throughout the pandemic. I work in food stamps and public health program, a free public health program called Medi-Cal that people in California may be familiar with. The reason why I got involved in SEIU Drop the Cops is, of course, the inspiration from the 20 to 24 million, or some people say 16 to 24 million people movement, anti-racist movement that popped off last summer in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. I think apropos the discussions that the Labor for Black Lives Collective led in the last panel, I got involved in SEIU Drop the Cops as an effort towards building union democracy so that we can, as the rank and file, and what Julia mentioned about the rank and file being the leaders of this anti-racist movement, both in our union and in solidarity with the community outside of our union and the 20 million people who mobilized last summer and really advanced the dialogue and the vision for our struggle. Again, going back to the Labor for Black Lives panel, and I love that discussion. I like the way that they organized it and allowing us to chat and share our ideas, is that I would say this, that if I could, and I think if any anti-racist fighter could fight within our union to advance this idea of disaffiliation from police, and based on a request for information that we got back from our union, there are 37,000 law enforcement in our union and 15,000 sworn officers. Moreover, well, maybe not moreover, but just in addition to that, Rashard Brooks was murdered by one of our members, Garrett Rolfe, who is now back on working again. He's on murder charges. If we could fight this struggle within our union, we would do it. But our experience has shown that due to the lack of democracy and the power hoarding by the union, we cannot achieve that at this moment. But I think that through our efforts in SEIU Drop the Cops, through building more ties like the one that this conference is building, we can begin to get towards that type of union that really, in my opinion, must be built. Otherwise, the union movement will wither on the vine, as it has for the past, I guess, maybe since the AFL-CIO got together back in the mid-50s. It's been a steady decline from 35% of the working class organized in unions now to like 11% or 6% of the private sector. So I guess that's a good introduction. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Awesome, thank you. It's true, unions are a constant struggle. And last but not least, Alice Rosewater from AFSCME. Can you introduce yourself and tell us why you're here?
For sure. My name is Alice Rosewater. I use she, her pronouns. I am guesting from a local 3758 AFSCME. We represent, we're a small local, less than 200 people, representing 5-county library district in southwestern Washington. I got involved for similar reasons. I've been an anti-capitalist for a number of years and anti-police. And, the movement for Black Lives last year was definitely my big inspiration to, get directly involved with the movement, especially seeing and learning more about how police have I've long believed that labor power and withholding labor power is, one of the primary ways that, change is accomplished in our society. And just to see that used for nefarious ends by, police in order to advance, a murderous agenda, I knew that I had to get involved in some way. And I believe I joined Cop Free AFSCME in late July. It was started around early June, around the same time as these other sister organizations like SEIU Drop the Cops. And yeah, I think I'm, as a library worker, I noticed the contradictions very strongly between, the emphasis and funding that police are given, partly because of the unions that they were part of. The way that city budgets are, almost, I think, a third of our city budget here in Olympia, Washington, goes towards police, and that's upwards of, I think it's over 50% in larger metropolitan areas, especially with higher Black and Indigenous populations, which is just wild to consider. Just how much of how many resources, how many working class dollars are put towards just creating a police state. And I've also noticed that long-term historical trend of, as our unions have become less democratic, they've also become more intertwined with the police. Like Asta mentioned, the merger of the AFL and the CIO, but also, the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, and, the long-term trend of, since the 40s and 50s, of unions in America choosing to give up the power to strike in order to, get contracts, instead of saying, we won't work unless you give us these things during contracts, which is, the original way of negotiating in our unions. Those were my primary purposes for joining this movement, and I'm hoping that together we can form a cross-union movement in order to disaffiliate from cops in our unions.
Cool. Thank you. Interesting point about business unionism bringing us the cops. I thought, first of all, let's hear sort of what the demands of your group are, what exactly SEIU Drop the Cops wants to accomplish. And maybe Julia, you can give us a rundown of what the demands of SEIU Drop the Cops are.
Sure. So our demands are kind of ranging in terms of the movement, and also some of the things that we think that the labor movement at large can do. So I don't know, I guess I could go in order, but there's some that I feel like are merit more discussion, especially like currently because of the political situation that we're in. Asta and myself, we were just talking about that, about some of the demands. So one of the particular demands that kind of stand out to me is demand. We have, how many demands do we have? 11? Sorry, let me pull that up. And number 4 is probably the most kind of important now, which was that we don't take money we don't support candidates who support the police. And of course, any candidate that is endorsed by any police organization, we will oppose them. And I think that's really important, especially now, because with organizing under a Biden administration, the union movement, which is one of the other issues for why it's gotten, there's less people in it, and kind of the top-down issues, is because the Democratic Party has played a role in suppressing and attacking the labor movement. Whatever lip service they give, top to bottom, there have been attacks that have been led by Democratic Party organizations and candidates, including Joe Biden. And so what and not just attacking union members, but attacking the working class at large. Recently, that resolution that was passed that would say that they wouldn't fund local governments that supported defunding the police was a total slap in the face. And it was meant to be such. They're calling the George Floyd Act to give more money to police, supposedly for training. The police seem to be able to enact their training when there's murderous white supremacists who've killed a bunch of people. They seem to not kill those people, but unarmed Black people, disabled people, queer people, immigrants, the training just seems to go out the window. But that's actually because the issue isn't training, the issue is the white supremacist system of the police. Anyway, we had a debate because the union leadership is completely tied hand in glove with the Democratic Party. And so they want to be able to use groups like SEIU Drop the Cops and Cop Free AFSCME as a cover for their politics that support the police and have the police as our members. And at the same time, we said no and knew that the police are not our friends, and that the Democratic Party, who pays lip service to Black Lives Matter, actually supports the police. So that's one of our biggest demands, or most important ones, which I think is why we had some pushback from some elected officials about SEIU Drop the Cops within SEIU, because we are unwavering in our opposition to police, all police. So I don't know, Asta, do you have the demands pulled up? I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure to talk about that one because the politics are totally interconnected. Right. Yeah. I meant our demands specifically.
Yeah, the demands, we dropped them in the chat. You can check them out.
There we go.
There's a live link. And if I may, I would like to chime in on this topic because I think it's vitally important, and it ties into our toolkit that we'll share a little bit later. I think it's, as we build, within our unions a struggle against the police, it's important to have guiding foundational demands that focus our efforts. I think all of the tactics that we may use, whatever they may be, mobilizing a rally or having a webinar or building a conference like this one, they need to rest upon a strong foundation, and our demands, and we struggled hard to fight for those demands. We had a democratic discussion that was certainly within Drop the Cops that was pushed back, got pushed back, as Julia mentioned, by some leaders, elected leaders on the executive board, primarily in 1021. But we won that vote, and our primary demand is kick the cops out of our union. Again, sort of the most egregious issue, that highlights the reason why we did that is, as I mentioned before, Garrett Rolfe, who's a member of SEIU NAGE, an affiliate of SEIU, murdered Rashard Brooks, and now has his job back. But I think very soon after Garrett Rolfe murdered Brooks, he was in communication with Ken Allen, who's the union rep in Atlanta. So that means that our union dues are going to protect a racist murdering cop. So we got to kick them out. That's number one. And then, of course, you can read all of the other demands, but I just want to piggyback off of what Julia said about the demand about the politics. And the reason is this: we've seen ostensible progressive politicians, by virtue of them voting present recently, giving $1.9 billion to the Capitol Police. And as Julia mentioned, the Senate 99-0 passed an unbinding resolution, but it shows their allegiance to the police, saying that we're not going to fund municipalities that defund the police. And those guiding principles help keep us on track towards our goal of creating a cop-free union and hopefully a cop-free society.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things to unpack there with some of the political issues you raise, and we should get a little deeper into that. But I want to hear from Alice too for the AFSCME perspective, because this may go even more for AFSCME, run by Lee Saunders, who's a very close Obama ally, very tied into the Democratic Party just as much as Mary Kay Henry, and probably somewhat less progressive than Mary Kay Henry. What are you trying to accomplish in AFSCME?
Well, we're trying to work from we're still formulating a list of demands in that way. We face sort of I think even more of an uphill battle than SEIU Drop the Cops in regards to how enmeshed our union is with cops, correctional officers. I believe the number you gave, Asta, for how many police were in the SEIU, was that about 20,000, 25,000?
37,000 law enforcement.
37,000.
15,000 sworn officers.
15,000 sworn officers. Whereas on AFSCME's website, and they list this, is there was 90,000 police officers and within AFSCME out of 1.6 million members, in addition to 85,000 corrections officers and correctional employees. And that's not even counting, there's a separate spot on the website, but they don't list the exact amounts for parole officers and psychiatric institutional workers, which I think it's important to include, all members of the prison industrial complex, even if they're not strictly working within prisons. And specifically with regards to prisons, we've received a lot of pushback when we've pushed our demands within councils, especially from council leadership, with regards to our demand that we also disaffiliate from correctional officers, because they represent, again, 5% apiece. 5% of our union is police officers, 5% is correctional officers, and then a few additional percent for parole, I would assume. And we received a lot of pushback on correctional officers, for some reason. And this is a big issue with just getting, those stories out there, like Eason-L's at the presentation at the beginning. People don't seem to connect the dots between the treatment that we see, the videos we see of police brutality on the street. That exact same stuff is happening behind closed doors in prisons. Sometimes even more egregious, but it's not publicly available because it's behind concrete walls. And so it's very important. It's a leap of empathy to realize, if we're against cops, we have to also be against correctional officers, even if it isn't as politically viable. At the moment, and we hear politically viable, but what I don't think is politically viable is just saying we're against cops and not correctional officers, when that, there is no reasoning that excludes cops without also excluding correctional officers. They are part of the same system. So if we're not ideologically consistent, I think that our movement will crumble, if poked at with just the least amount of, So that's the big thing that we're pushing for, is making sure that our message isn't watered down, and that we are fighting for all people that are being impacted by the prison industrial complex, and against all forces that are colluding within AFSCME to cause our union to not fight for the entire working class, including those of the working class that are behind bars.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to just also speak on that. In one of our SEIU Drop the Cops, Beyond Policing and Prisons, we call on SEIU to organize workers and to put money towards organizing the working class. So we're not just, because sometimes what we've gotten pushback on is saying, well, if we get rid of these cops, that means we're going to have less dues paying members, because 90,000 or 38,000 is like a lot. But I think we also are saying we don't just want to get rid of the police because, you know, they're enemies of the working class, which they are, but also because we want to organize a labor movement with more workers. We want more workers in SEIU. We want no cops in SEIU. We don't want a smaller union. We want a bigger union without our class enemies and evictors. So I just want to also make that point, because sometimes we get pushed into this situation where that's what's said, which is a bit cynical. I mean, you know, we don't want our class enemies just because they pay dues. Like, we want, you know, we want a working class that is powerful, that is combative, and that is organized. And we want more people in our unions. We just don't want any cops in our unions. Yeah,
already in a very short time, we've seen that this issue is tied to so many bigger issues: decline of the labor movement, Democratic Party politics, and also the practicalities of union politics and dues paying members. And it's not easy to get dues paying members out of unions no matter what. But let's talk a little bit about the toolkit itself that you all put together, because if any of y'all have not looked at it, it's very impressive. It is a very impressive toolkit, and everybody should take a look. And I wonder, Asta, if you could just, we obviously can't go through the whole thing, but just talk a little bit about what's in the toolkit and how this can help people with the practicalities of getting some of this stuff accomplished.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. I dropped the toolkit in the chat, and I want to give a big hat tip to Annabelle Heckler, who's a 1199 East alumni, for really helping to create this. Very well resourced. Some of the things that are in the toolkit. Just open it up right quick. You know, we talk about in the toolkit, you know, build your struggle through a petition. So I've had the honor of meeting the person who created the original Drop the Cops petition. However, they've been behind the scenes. They're a staff member, which sort of, I think, ties into another section of the toolkit, which mentions, yes, we are for a rank and file led movement, but we need allies everywhere we can get, and the staff are very important allies. So when, you know, we launched SEIU Drop the Cops, we had our original petition, and we gathered over 1,000 signatures. And with that, of course, you know, if you set up the petition in such a way that you can gather emails, now it's an organizing tool. Now it's a way to reach out to people who agree with you to continue to build and grow. We also have other points in here, like building strength and unity with a survey. One of our leaders in SEIU Drop the Cops created was pushing for civilianizing SEIU 1021, basically taking, you know, from my understanding, it's like a two-pronged struggle where you have, if there are rank and file non-law enforcement, like clerical workers that work in law enforcement, taking them out of law enforcement and putting them in the same job classification, like say in the Human Services Agency, like where I work, so that they're to assist the poor and oppressed and not oppress them. And also on the civilianized point, taking the supervisory roles of the police over these non-law enforcement, clerical and other workers, and taking them out of that power dynamic. And so as part of that civilianized struggle, our leader in Drop the Cops created a survey to find out, what do you agree with more? Building a movement or a union that is for care and health and safety, or for one that uses the, the murderous power of the state to oppress people. We have our Justice for Rayshard Brooks campaign that is, I think, rather modest, but at the moment, but I think due to the fact that Rayshard Brooks's murderer is still working, we're building connections with other groups who are pushing for that. And it's basically like, call the international union and demand no union dues for murdering police. While some people may not, and it's an ongoing process of trying to build support for disaffiliation, I think that even at, on this one basic point, which is we can't have murderers in our union. If I were to kill somebody as a food stamps worker, I'm fired. But if a police officer murders somebody, as we can see, Garrett Rolfe gets his job back, and that's completely unacceptable.
They get a lawyer.
Definitely.
They get a lawyer, we pay for it.
Yes. Pass a resolution. We have a lot of examples of resolutions, including the one that y'all made in Writers Guild of America East. Pass a Labor Council resolution. We have some examples that are linked to different pages, like the one that the California Labor Federation passed, and they represent 2.1 million members. It's a very strong resolution with good language about the police being tied to the racist slave patrols 300 years ago, which is a very powerful point that cannot be ignored. Bargaining for the common good. I think on this point, I recently met with some students at City College of San Francisco who have developed a curriculum for a whole semester this fall, and they're including Drop the Cops in their class, who are pushing back against police on their campus and just building consciousness around fighting against white supremacy. And I think this idea of bargaining for the common good is essential, because we can't win as 14 million members in the labor movement without allies outside of the labor movement. And I think it's worth noting that 20 million people mobilized last summer, and that's overshadows the number here in our labor movement. And I think, going back to Julia's point, if we want to grow the movement, there's our next union members. We can kick out all the 90,000 cops out of AFSCME, kick out all the 37,000 and 15,000 law enforcement in SEIU, and start reaching out to the unorganized 20 million rank and file workers who were out in the streets last summer. And I could go on and on, but I don't want to take up too much time. This is a very well-resourced thing, and we're going to be building on it. I like to consider this as a living, breathing document, and I've already begun gathering some of the resources that were shared in the Labor for Black Lives panel that I definitely want to bring back to SEIU Drop the Cops about including in this toolkit.
Yeah, let me, Julia, talk a little bit about the practicalities if somebody's on this call saying, how do I get started on this? How do we actually start making movement on this issue? What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, I would first tell them to talk with their coworkers. Start to talk with people who are like-minded, to try to build community amongst each other, and also to be able to kind of increase this issue and increase the discussion about this issue in your union. And to join, especially if you're a member of SEIU, join Drop the Cops. And if you're a staffer, part of one of the discussions that we had was the role of staffers in our majority rank and file member organization. And we want staffers not just as allies, because of course that could be anybody in the community, but staffers can play a real role in terms of taking a position against the police, especially ones that might be asked to organize police. We had some staffers come to our meeting and they were like, you know what, we're afraid that SEIU is going to ask us to get police and to try to recruit police, and we don't want to do that. And so then we had a discussion about that. I had suggested that in the writings of their contract, that they have a preamble that states that they refuse to organize any kind of law enforcement, and that is a statement that they make in their contract, in contract negotiations, so that clearly the police will see that they refuse to organize them. And so that and in that way they can play a role not just as staffers for SEIU, but also as members of their own union. But to go back to your point, I think that this is going to be something that has to start with our conversations with our coworkers, and also for people to see how national SEIU Drop the Cops is. It really is just, hey, I'm about to drop the cops. Where are you located? Oh, well, I'm in Vermont. I'm in Georgia. I'm in Oakland. I'm in Los Angeles. And having those people come together. To me, SEIU Drop the Cops is something that is an ongoing fight that waxes and wanes as the movement has waxed and waned, but it's going to grow again. It's not like the police have stopped killing us. It's not like they've stopped evicting people. It seems like the Biden administration is ramping up for more austerity to attack us. So I'm sure there's going to be another uprising where people are going to learn the lessons from this last fight. Except for this time, we are already poised to make a fight within our unions and not just outside of them. The SEIU had the strike for Black Lives, which, I mean, it really wasn't a strike for Black Lives. It was dope. Like, the port shutdown was amazing. They shut down all the ports. The one in NorCal was very lively. There were some like protests here and there, but we really should take seriously this idea of strike and perhaps general strike for Black lives and have that as our goal. And when the police murder us, we don't just wait till we get off work to go to the protest. That when they kill us, that we refuse to work and that we withhold our labor, and that is something that's in our mind, and it's something that we get in other folks' minds. Because people were, the working class was out in the streets, not just in the United States, it was around the world. People were uprising, and I was meeting with people virtually during the uprising. And I tell the story a lot. I'm going to tell it real brief because I wore my Class Struggles International. I got to talk about some international thing. A comrade that I have in Bolivia, she was saying how the Black Lives Matter movement was so important in terms of eliminating and getting rid of the coup, because for one, it inspired people to see, especially oppressed people in the streets, fighting back, burning cop cars, taking over the police precincts, all that stuff. But what she more so said was that the U.S. imperialist machine had to withdraw their troops because they had to deal with the uprising in the United States. And so we have a really important role to play as working class people in the US, but also in the heart of imperialism, to really fight those people and to really be the eye in international and SEIU and all the other unions in terms of linking together. Because believe me, the police are not nice in any country, in any part of the world. They're oppressive in every country, every part of the world.
True. Thank you. And Alice, I want to give you a crack at this also. How do you, what do you say to people who maybe have an impulse to get involved in this, don't know how to get it going within their own union? And also, how do people talk to, when people are going to build support in their own union for an issue like this, how do they talk to the kind of people who aren't on this call? The kind of people who are not as engaged and plugged in as the people on this call are? How do you build that support?
Well, I would say, so we've been really trying to emphasize a bottom-up approach instead of top-down, because we feel like, that focusing on changing the minds of, the leadership is almost always going to be a dead end. I mean, there's definitely benefits to, like converting staffers to our cause and stuff. But, as far as, the very top go, and I think the focus should always be on locals and councils. And I think that that's where our strength lies, and like strengthening union democracy and working from the bottom layer and going up. And to that end, we've been trying to create some toolkits with resolutions that people can pass at their locals and councils to commit to disaffiliation. And if that if that fails or is not viable for them at their local at the moment, to, as a stopgap measure, commit to no longer adding any police or correctional officers. So like freezing the number within their local and council, which can freeze their political power within the council at the moment, which we feel like is it bridges the gap. It's not reformist because it is building towards full disaffiliation, but we always say, fight for disaffiliation first. But we feel like, working at the local and council level and forging those bonds between locals and councils that have been divided through the union bureaucracy is the best way of, building the police disaffiliation movement within our union. And as far as talking to people, outside this call about this cause, I would just bring up just how close this issue is. I mean, most people in America have a family member who has been incarcerated at one point or another, or who has had an encounter with police, a negative encounter with police, obviously. And just to emphasize that this isn't an issue that just affects someone else. This is an issue that affects you and yours, but we're fighting for everyone by fighting against police and correctional officers and the prison industrial complex.
And I would say briefly, for what it's worth, at the Writers Guild, I mean, when we pursued the resolution for asking the AFL-CIO to disaffiliate from the police unions, one of the good things about framing it as asking the AFL-CIO to kick out the cops is that a lot of people would get caught up on this question of like, well, should police be allowed to have unions? Should police be allowed to have unions? Is being against police unions being anti-labor? Is it being anti-union? People really get caught up on that. And to approach it as disaffiliation is to be able to say, look, that's not the question. The question is, we have a labor federation that stands for something specific, and cops don't stand for that, and we need to kick them out, And one of the good things about it is that you don't have to spend all your time having the argument about, well, should police be allowed to have unions? Like, we can have that argument later. But I did want to circle back to the kind of broader political stuff that we talked about a little bit at the beginning. When this movement started a year ago, Julia, I was on a panel with you a year ago. Donald Trump was president. The political landscape in America was very different. Here we are a year later. Democrats run everything in Washington. Joe Biden is very pro-union in many ways. I mean, he's a pro-union president by the standards of the Democratic Party. What does that mean for this issue? It raised a lot of nuances. I'd like to hear from any of you who want to tackle that.
I would say that Joe Biden is pro union bureaucracy. I do not think he is pro union. I don't see that. He has not given more money towards the organizing workers. He gave lip service to the Amazon workers, and now it's going to go to court and all this stuff. And I think the hope is that it just gets buried somewhere. Joe Biden, in my opinion, is the president of stability and legitimizing the American capitalist state. That's what I think he's doing. Yes, Harris is pro-police. They just passed that George Floyd bill to give more money to police. Obama and the whole entire crew has been talking about how defund is ridiculous and all this and that. SEIU actually, I think, has been trying to organize more ICE agents. They've increased the amount of immigrants now they don't call them kids in cages. Before they called them kids in cages and they said it was sad. Now they say that it's migrant detention facilities and they don't have a problem with it. To me, it's all of this is really just semantics in a lot of ways. For sure, Donald Trump took a very anti-union stance, and Joe Biden gives lip service to unions, but I don't think that he's supportive of the workers. But to answer your question more specifically about how do we organize now that frankly the union bureaucracy, which is completely tied to the Democratic Party, is taking their funds away from fighting all these social justice projects that they claim to support, now that they're not wanting people to be in the streets, now that they're not wanting to, they're only symbolically opposing this particular politician or that particular cop like Chauvin. What do? How do we organize? I think that really the way we I think housing is one of the more obvious issues because the police evict people, and the police, like the sheriffs in particular in Los Angeles, I'm not sure if people are aware, they are not part of a union, but they're certainly part of some gangs. And I encourage people to Google LASD gangs, because the sheriffs are part of gangs that kill people like Andres Guardado for initiation into their gangs. And so then what do we do about that? I think we have to connect the dots for people in terms of fighting for our lives and fighting for our living standards. We have to fight for not just the bare minimum of survival, but a world where we don't live in terror of losing our homes, terror of being able to afford food or healthcare. And the Democratic Party is no solution to that. As soon as the movements that we created as working class people are died down or get co-opted, all the rhetoric that they had before goes away. So I think our time now has to be the patient and deliberate organizing and discussions like we're having today, and like I hope people will take back it. And so like having those kind of discussions with people and really trying to connect the dots about that and about the police and why the police play this role against people with mental health disabilities. And I think also furthermore, we need to be talking about political organization. Now, this is my own opinion. It's not the opinion of SEIU Drop the Cops, but I'm going to say it because I got a chance to say it. We need to have political organization outside of the Democratic Party and the Republican parties. We can't ignore the fact that there's political organization is a way for us to not only bring our ideas together, but be able to participate possibly in the electoral process, but in all levels of politics, to put forward our perspectives to fight the police and to fight the landlords and capitalists and all those other folks. And to do that through the labor movement. I feel like we need to be doing that, and we need to be talking about that now, because the Democratic Party is no answer for us. We build the movements, and then they claim to be part of them, and then they claim to lead them, and then they destroy them. So like, and that is not going to stop happening. And so we need to be like, in this preparatory stage of organizing ourselves so that when more uprisings happen, and possibly when we can play a role in them, that we already have the tools, that we're not just hit with this or that happening. Exactly, they are the graveyard of social movements. And we can't, and folks that can't be bought. The labor movement is lying with people who could never be bought. We are in Black August now. George Jackson, Jonathan Jackson, people who were incarcerated, people who were organizing, incredibly brave people, Nat Turner. So many of those people could never be bought. And so really playing that role and seeing ourselves as the leaders of not only this movement, but of the movements to come that haven't even happened yet. So sorry if that was a roundabout answer, but
that was a good answer.
That was amazing. If I could just real quick add to that, the idea that Joe Biden is a pro-labor politician, one has to get back to the the central point of this conference about the police and the role that they play in society. They are opposed to the power of the working class. You had 99, I mean, at least if you look at the New York Times, you had, they documented 99 different cities that had the police that brutalized the protesters last summer. I did a quick little back of the envelope math on that. And of those 99 cities, 62% of those cities were presided over by Democratic Party mayors. And I dropped a little thing in the chat that's a little Instagram graphic showing that Biden has out-resourced the police compared to Trump. And he's only in his first year. So if we think you can't have a pro-labor politician who at the same time adds more resources to the police, that's a contradiction. There's no pro-labor going on with the Democratic Party. As Julia said, it's lip service. And on the point, yes, we do need to build our own institutions. And to the extent that it's helpful and illustrative of how to do that, maybe looking back at the struggle for a labor party, Tony Mazzocchi in 1996, this idea of building an independent political party outside of the Democrats and Republicans that is fully funded by and the politics controlled by the rank and file of the labor movement.
Yeah, ironically, it was much easier for the Democrats to be anti-establishment when Trump was the establishment. I mean, for the labor movement, for unions to be anti-establishment. And when the Democrats have control, it's this issue, police, gets much trickier, actually. Alice, thoughts on that?
Well, I just wanted to reaffirm that I completely agree with Julia and Mark that we need an outside political organization. I think, again, the trouble comes the same way with our organizations is just making sure that they aren't turned into reformist organizations that basically assimilate within the existing structure. I think you're seeing some worrying trends with organizations like the DSA currently who are ending up supporting a lot of the Democratic Party's aims. So while I agree with creating an outside political organization, I think that we need to be very strict in how that organization will operate. But in any case, I also wanted to mention something that Julia mentioned about, I think it's important to, recognize the safety of workers doing mental health checks. But I also think that, I think mental health checks can also funnel people into the psychiatric system, which can be, as brutal as the prison system. And I think we also need to, when we're deconstructing the logic of incarceration and policing, we also need to, deconstruct, the idea that we can just one-to-one replace cops with mental health workers and eliminate violence inherent in that system. I don't think Julie was saying that, obviously. I'm just, emphasizing the point that we need to, interrogate the logic of that system at all levels and all professions. And we need to, recognize the agency of, mentally ill and all unhoused people who are the victims of that institution.
Sure. And it looks like we got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so maybe we'll do a little lightning round answer here. Everybody can get 1 minute to answer. Just give people one idea to walk away from this today with, one thing they can do when they leave this panel to advance this issue. 1 minute each. Julia.
Okay. So I think, oh my gosh, now I'm getting nervous.
You're on the spot. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think some of our contact informations are in the comments. So check us out. I think we have to see our fight against racism and white supremacy and capitalism as centering as our workplace, and that the working class is the revolutionary subject. It's that idea has been so divorced from a lot of our discussions that, like I said, we're at work and then we leave work to go to the protest. We don't see work as the protest. And if people can take something away, is that we see ourselves as workers, and that as workers, we have political agency, and that we need to be striking against police terror. We need to be figuring out a way and win. That when the police murder our people, when the police attack our workers, that we also organize ourselves, and we're prepared to strike against the police when they attack us. So that's one.
That was a good bold takeaway. Asta.
Awesome, Julia. I agree 100%. And I dropped a little thing, and so did Alice of our Drop the Cops and Cop Free AFSCME email addresses. So please get in touch with us. And I want to, just highlight what we're doing now is the takeaway. Building these conferences, building these united fronts of working people, both within the union movement and outside. Anybody who labors for a wage. We need to build these ties, and we need to. I'm just going to highlight, the action point that we're trying to lead this conference with, which is an open letter in response to the Blueprint for Public Safety. I think that's what it's called. That's been put out by the AFL-CIO, SEIU, IBT, etc. Get involved in helping to shape this open letter, because it's a jumping off point for the next steps that we're going to have to take for decades in the future, because this struggle is going to take a while, but it's one that for all justice-minded, anti-racist fighters is one that is well worth being involved in. It's inspirational, and it's helping to build our power.
Very true. Alice, last 30 seconds and takeaway thoughts.
Totally. I just wanted to emphasize again what Asta and Julia were saying, and talk about how this is a long-term struggle. There's the movement, or the movement, at least in the media's eyes, is going to wax and wane over the years. But what's important is that everyone builds self-sustaining ways of being involved with the movement. Like avoid burnout. Just however small you think that your contributions are, they are immensely important to the people around you, and to just create those self-sustaining relationships within your communities, within your locals, within your councils, everywhere, and just keep that going. And I think Kurt Vonnegut had a quote that said, everyone wants to build, no one wants to do maintenance. But it's important. We got to find a way to love maintenance. We got to find a way of creating these maintaining movements that fight for solidarity.
Great. Wow, those were 3 great answers at the very end to close it out. Thanks, y'all. I wish we had more time. Everybody, please check out the toolkit, and feel free to contact me or anybody else.
Thanks, y'all. Enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for being here. It's amazing. Wow. Okay. Yeah, thank you again, SEIU Drop the Cops and Hamilton Nolan for moderating. That was a really powerful discussion. And next piece, we're going to be moving on to the lunch hour, or if you're in Pacific Standard Time, lunch hour skill sharing workshop with the AFT 1789 and Solidarity Now Slate. Feel free to stick around. But yeah, like always, we'll take our 15-minute break, and we will reconvene here at 12:45. So, and yeah, I dropped the open letter that again in the chat that that Asta referred to if you're coming in late or lost it. But yeah, we'll see you all at 12:45.